The relentless summer heat pressed down on the narrow, crowded street, baking the asphalt and making the air thick with the smell of exhaust and cheap street food. Michelle Lee, 25 years old, wiped a bead of sweat from her brow with the back of a calloused hand. Her focus entirely on the fragile display of ceramic jewelry she had arranged on a small folding table. These weren't mere trinkets. They were her lifeblood, painstakingly crafted over sleepless nights, each piece representing a day's worth of medicine for her father, who was battling a persistent respiratory illness back in their small, cluttered apartment. She had saved for months to rent this tiny, permissible spot, a slice of pavement bordering the exclusive financial district, hoping the passing foot traffic of wealthy executives might translate into a few sales. A low, thunderous growl of an engine interrupted the usual urban cacophony, signaling a change in the flow of traffic that Michelle immediately recognized as trouble. A massive, obsidian black SUV, a model favored by the obscenely affluent, attempted a reckless turn into a restricted alleyway, its driver seemingly oblivious to the established lane markings or the existence of pedestrians and small vendors. Patricia Johnson, a woman of 61 whose silver hair was always meticulously coiled into a formidable helmet and whose attire always screamed old money, was behind the wheel. Patricia was late for a high society luncheon where she was slated to give a keynote address on ethical investment, a topic she practiced only in theory. In her haste and self-importance, she failed to notice Michelle's small operation, or perhaps she did notice and simply didn't care. The vehicle's enormous front wheel clipped the corner of Michelle's makeshift table, sending the delicate ceramics skittering across the pavement with a sickening, brittle crash. Dust motes danced in the brief, catastrophic silence that followed. Michelle gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, not in pain, but in sheer cold shock as she watched her entire stock shatter into irreparable shards of color. Patricia slammed on the brakes, the sudden stop jarring her out of her conversation with her financial advisor on the hands-free set. She didn't bother to turn off the engine or even fully roll down the tinted window, instead leaning out just enough to cast a disdainful, predatory glance at the wreckage and the young woman kneeling amidst the debris. "Move your little roadside stand, girl," Patricia snapped, her voice crisp and laced with a patronizing superiority that cut deeper than the glass shards. "You're blocking the delivery entrance. Honestly, the lack of spatial awareness these days is staggering. And try not to scratch the paint with your dust." Michelle slowly rose, her eyes burning with a mixture of helplessness and righteous fury. "Ma'am," she began, her voice trembling but firm, "you just destroyed everything I owned. These were not just decorations, this was the medicine money for my father. You have to pay for this. It cost me nearly $1,200 to produce all of this." Patricia let out a sharp, incredulous laugh, a sound devoid of humor or empathy. $1,200? Don't be absurd. You bought these from a discount craft store. And why would I pay? You chose to set up your bazaar in the middle of a business thoroughfare. Consider it a steep and frankly much-needed lesson in property lines. She prepared to roll up the window, dismissing Michelle with a flick of her wrist. But Michelle, fueled by desperation, stepped forward, placing a hand on the expensive car door. "Please, I am begging you. My father, he needs this. You have insurance for this kind of accident, surely?" The action, the sheer nerve of a poor girl touching her imported metal, sent Patricia into a cold rage. "Don't you dare touch my vehicle. You people are all the same. Looking for a handout, always a sob story. Get your filthy hands off my property or I'll call the police and have you arrested for attempted extortion and assault. Now, leave." With a final glare that promised ruin, Patricia accelerated, leaving Michelle alone with the pulverized fragments of her last hope and the biting smell of scorched rubber. Later that same week, ironically, fate brought them back together with a brutal twist. Michelle, still reeling from the loss, had taken a grueling temporary job delivering packages in a far less safe part of town to try and recoup her losses. She was walking past a secluded ATM tucked away on a side street when she heard a muffled cry for help. It was Patricia. She was being aggressively accosted by a pair of large, desperate individuals trying to rip the expensive gold bracelet, a family heirloom, off her wrist. Despite the fear that clenched her throat, the raw sense of injustice she felt towards Patricia was momentarily eclipsed by her innate human instinct to intervene. Michelle didn't think. She reacted. She grabbed a discarded heavy metal pipe from a nearby construction skip and with a surprising burst of strength, slammed it against the wall near the muggers, creating a deafening clang. The muggers, startled and assuming they had stumbled into a trap, immediately bolted. Patricia, disheveled and shaken, stumbled back against the cold brick wall, clutching her bleeding wrist. Michelle dropped the pipe and rushed to her, breathing heavily. "Are you all right?" she asked, her concern genuine. Patricia took several shallow breaths, her eyes wide with shock. Her expensive suit was rumpled, her coiffure slightly askew, a visual state she hadn't experienced in 40 years. I think so. They got the cufflink, but the bracelet. I kept the bracelet." She then looked at Michelle, slowly recognizing the dirty, exhausted figure. "You, the popcorn girl, the ceramic girl. Why did you help me?" Michelle shrugged, feeling suddenly foolish and exhausted. "It's just what you do. But since I saved your life, maybe now you can finally pay for my merchandise." Patricia's face, already pale from the scare, hardened immediately. "Don't be ridiculous. That was a moment of instinct. This is business, and don't you dare touch that." Patricia pointed a shaky, manicured finger at Michelle's wrist, where a simple, thick, braided leather cord was tied. "That bracelet. It's antique. Where did a girl like you get something so unique and expensive? It belonged to my late mother-in-law." Michelle instinctively covered the bracelet, which was indeed her only inheritance from her own deceased mother. "It's a gift. It's worth nothing, ma'am. It's sentimental." Patricia's eyes narrowed, a cold calculation replacing the earlier fear. She sensed an opportunity, a way to control this girl who somehow now had leverage over her. "We'll see about that. I owe you a debt, I suppose, for the inconvenience. Come to the address on this card tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. Ask for the head of staff, and don't be late. And bring that—" She gestured to the bracelet, her eyes lingering on the worn leather. "We need to talk about compensation." The next morning, Michelle reluctantly presented herself at the sprawling Johnson estate, a Gothic revival mansion that stood like a fortress against the rest of the world. She wasn't compensated for her jewelry or her heroism. Instead, Patricia, having decided that debt could only be repaid with control, offered her a job as a live-in housekeeper and cook. The salary was high enough to ensure her father's care and recovery, but the conditions were clear: absolute obedience and the immediate severing of all ties to her current life and friends, maintaining absolute discretion about the incident and her past. "I can't have you broadcasting the details of my personal life, can I? And your mannerisms need serious refinement. The way you speak, the way you carry yourself. You will be an embarrassment to the household." "But given your situation," Patricia purred, a predatory smile touching her thin lips, "I'll consider it a pet project. You are replacing the last cook, who lacked any concept of hygiene and quit abruptly. You will wear the uniform, you will keep the schedule, and you will forget everything outside these gates. Do we have an agreement, Michelle?" Driven by her father's worsening condition and the crippling medical bills, Michelle swallowed her pride and the bitter taste of Patricia's disdain. "Yes, Mrs. Johnson, I agree." It was only later that evening, while wiping down the vast, sterile expanse of the kitchen, that Michelle first encountered Robert Williams. He was the only son, the single heir, and the reason for the estate's formidable security. He was a firefighter, a profession that seemed jarringly out of place against the backdrop of such immense protected wealth. He was tall, with the powerful, disciplined build of someone who regularly faced danger, but his eyes, a clear, warm grey, held an unmistakable kindness that contrasted sharply with his mother's brittle demeanour. He had just returned from a brutal 48-hour shift, his official work jacket slung over one powerful shoulder, smelling faintly of smoke and the crisp, clean scent of the cold night air, a scent that hinted at courage and immediate, unselfish action. "Hey," he said, his voice deep and easy, pausing by the door. "You must be the new help. My mother didn't even mention she'd hired anyone. Welcome to the asylum." Michelle, caught off guard by his casual manner, nearly dropped the expensive ceramic plate she was polishing. "Oh, sir, I mean Mr. Williams. Yes, I'm Michelle. I just started today." Robert waved a dismissive hand. "Robert, just Robert. And please call me that. Don't let my mother turn you into one of her uniformed automatons. She tries, I know. I'm 35 and she still tries." He smiled, a genuine, blinding flash of warmth that made Michelle's heart unexpectedly flutter. Patricia appeared in the doorway moments later, drawn by the sound of her son's voice. "Robert, what are you doing in the service area? You're tracking in dirt and you know you need to shower before you contaminate the main living space. And Michelle, she emphasized the name with cold annoyance, you know the rules. No personal conversation with the family unless absolutely necessary for your duties. Now go prepare my son a proper, healthy post-shift meal. He needs his nutrients. Something light, but rich in protein and organic. Robert rolled his eyes subtly behind his mother's back, a gesture that Michelle instantly understood. Mom, relax. I can fix my own damn protein shake. Michelle, don't worry about it. Just tell me your honest opinion on the local grocery store options for dinner. My mother only trusts places that charge double for the privilege. Michelle hesitated, glancing at the rigid figure of Patricia. Well, Robert, she said, using his first name carefully, emboldened by his easygoing manner. If you want something truly delicious, I could prepare the chicken paprikash my grandmother taught me. It's hearty, comforting, and I promise it will be better than anything from a diet clinic. A flicker of surprise, then pure pleasure, crossed Robert's face. Paprikash, seriously? That sounds incredible. Do it, please. And ignore my mother's dietary restrictions for tonight. I earned this. Patricia watched the exchange with a cold, calculating fury. The maid had daring personality, and worse, her son liked her. This was more than a mere employee. This was a threat to the carefully curated order of her life, and she would eradicate it before it took root. She had not forgotten the bracelet, the rescue, or the audacity of the girl who dared to stand up to her on the street. This relationship, whatever it was beginning to be, would be terminated immediately. Her plan to subtly humiliate and dismiss Michelle had just shifted to a strategy of open, sustained warfare, designed to drive the girl away and out of Robert's orbit forever, no matter the cost to his happiness or Michelle's well-being. The arrival of the chicken paprikash marked the beginning of an undeclared war in the Johnson household, a silent psychological campaign waged by Patricia against the unwelcome presence of Michelle. The dish, rich with the deep, comforting flavors of Michelle's Hungarian grandmother's recipe, slow-simmered chicken, creamy paprika-infused sauce, served over fluffy, buttery egg noodles, was an instant, resounding success with Robert. He devoured 3 enormous servings, his appreciation so genuine and enthusiastic that it was like a balm to Michelle's wounded spirit, a stark contrast to the relentless emotional battering she endured from his mother. Patricia, however, regarded the communal eating with the same intense revulsion one might reserve for a common rodent finding its way into a porcelain cabinet. She wouldn't taste it, claiming it was too rustic and potentially toxic given the vague origins of the ingredients, but she couldn't deny the effect it had on her son. Robert, typically reserved and often distant due to the exhausting nature of his work and the emotional chill of his home, was suddenly engaged, asking Michelle about her cooking techniques, her heritage, and her life before the mansion. These small shared moments, a conversation about the proper way to sweat onions, a quiet late-night chat about the contrasting peace and danger of the city, were the fertile ground where their forbidden affection began to take deep root. Patricia, recognizing the immediate and potent threat, redoubled her efforts to break Michelle's spirit. She began setting intentionally impossible standards, demanding the silverware be polished not just clean, but rendered invisible, insisting the antique Persian rugs be vacuumed and then immediately brushed by hand to ensure no single stray animal hair remained, and subjecting Michelle's meals, no matter how exquisite, to withering public critiques. One morning, over a flawlessly presented plate of avocado toast and poached eggs, Patricia pushed her plate away with a dramatic, exaggerated sigh. "Michelle, truly you are hopeless," she announced, speaking loudly enough for the distant gardener to hear. "The egg white is precisely 4 seconds too firm. My stomach lining can tolerate nothing less than perfect molecular adhesion. And the coffee, it tastes like a burnt offering. Either correct this incompetence immediately or find yourself on the street, where I suspect you are far more comfortable." Robert, who was reading the morning paper, slammed it down onto the mahogany table. He had endured his mother's passive aggression for 35 years, but seeing her deliberately humiliate the kindest person who had entered their home in decades pushed him past his breaking point. "Mother, that is enough," he growled, his voice low and dangerously controlled. "The food is excellent. You are simply looking for a reason to be cruel. Michelle, please ignore her." Her palate is only calibrated to detect misery in others. Patricia's face flushed a deep, ugly red. How dare you speak to me that way, Robert? I am merely establishing the required level of excellence for the staff I pay. This girl needs to learn her place. And you, she pointed a trembling finger at Michelle, don't you dare think that a few kind words from my son gives you any license to forget where you stand. You are a paid servant, nothing more. You clean the dirt. You don't belong in the light. Michelle felt the sting of the words, but Robert's defense, fierce and immediate, was what mattered. She lowered her gaze, whispering a hasty apology for the poor quality of the egg, and retreated to the safety of the kitchen, her heart aching for the complexity of the situation and the impossibility of their circumstances. Their relationship deepened in stolen moments. Clandestine conversations in the dimly lit garden shed, while Robert cleaned his professional gear, hurried, shared 30-minute lunches near the pool when Patricia was at her endless society functions, and 1,000 brief charged glances exchanged across the cavernous dining room. Robert found himself rescheduling his life around her presence. He started volunteering for shorter 36-hour shifts instead of his customary 48, finding the emptiness of the mansion unbearable without her quiet, comforting presence. He saw the kindness in her, the quick intelligence, the fierce determination to care for her ailing father, and the raw courage she had shown in saving his mother. One rainy Tuesday evening, they were sitting in the massive, underutilized library, a space Patricia never frequented, discussing a complex first aid manual Robert was studying. The conversation drifted, as it always did, from work to dreams. Michelle confessed her long-held desire to enroll in nursing school, a dream perpetually deferred by poverty and her father's medical expenses. Robert's hand, scarred and rough from years of battling fire, reached out and gently covered hers, resting on the worn book spine. "Michelle," he whispered, his grey eyes intense, reflecting the crackling fire in the hearth. "I don't care what my mother thinks or says. I haven't felt this connected to anyone, ever. I am falling for you. It's reckless, it's stupid, and it goes against every rule in this house, but I can't stop it. I want to build a life with you, a life where you are a registered nurse, not a maid. I want you to be more than just my mother's employee." The sudden, open declaration left Michelle breathless, her own deeply suppressed feelings surfacing with overwhelming force. "Robert, I love you too," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion, tears welling in her eyes. "But your mother, she will destroy us. She will ruin my father's life just to spite me." Robert squeezed her hand firmly. "Let her try. She doesn't control me anymore. You are my future, and I will defend you against everything, even her." This quiet, powerful declaration was the catalyst for the first major turning point in the domestic drama. Robert confronted his mother that very night, not out of anger, but out of resolute certainty. He found Patricia in her parlor, arranging fresh hydrangeas. "Mother," he began, without preamble, "Michelle and I are in a relationship. I love her, and I intend to marry her." The sound of the stem snapping in Patricia's hand was almost louder than his words. She slowly turned, her face a mask of cold horror. "A relationship? With the hired help? Are you unwell, Robert? Have you taken leave of your senses? You, the heir to the Williams-Johnson name, contemplating marriage with a scullery maid? What about your career? What about the investment ball next month? What will I tell the Reynolds family, whose daughter I've been grooming for you since she was 15? Robert held his ground, his firefighter training allowing him to maintain calm in the face of her emotional inferno. "You will tell them nothing. This is my life. Michelle is compassionate, she is brave, she is intelligent, and she makes me happy. Your reputation, your society connections, and your obsolete caste-driven sense of privilege mean absolutely nothing to me. I choose her," Patricia shrieked, throwing the vase of flowers across the room where it smashed against an 18th century cabinet, scattering glass and water. "No, I forbid it. You will not drag my family name through the mud for the sake of a fleeting illicit affair with a servant. She must have bewitched you. She's after the money, the visa, the status. I'll pay her off. I'll send her back to her ghetto. I will stop at nothing to prevent this catastrophic disgrace." The situation escalated violently 4 weeks later, leading to the second, most critical turning point. Michelle, overcome by nausea while preparing a complicated 10-course dinner for a visiting dignitary, collapsed in the kitchen. She was rushed to the nearby private clinic Patricia favored. The head physician, Dr. Hayes, called Patricia personally with the news. Michelle was 4 months pregnant. The child was Robert's. Patricia stood stunned, the phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. A grandchild. The thought, which should have brought joy, instead triggered a cold, terrifying panic. A Williams Johnson heir carried by a woman she despised, a poor girl whose commonness would contaminate the lineage. She instantly understood the terrible permanence of the situation. Before Robert could be informed, Patricia went to the hospital, not to offer comfort, but to execute a preemptive strike. She found Michelle alone, recovering but emotionally fragile. Patricia was calm, frighteningly so, presenting Michelle with an elegantly printed business card. "This is Dr. Vance," she explained, her voice low and dangerously reasonable. "The best in the city. He specializes in discreet, efficient, and irreversible solutions to problems like this. I have already booked the appointment for tomorrow morning. You will go. You will take care of this mistake, and I will ensure your father receives the best medical care for the rest of his life. No questions asked. A private ward, the best specialists, all paid for. All you have to do is make this problem disappear. Don't worry, Robert doesn't need to know." Michelle stared at the card, then at Patricia, feeling a mixture of terror and an incredible new strength. She had endured the verbal abuse, the humiliation, and the injustice, but the threat against her unborn child, Robert's child, the life they had just dreamed of together, was a line she would not allow to be crossed. "Get out," Michelle whispered, her voice surprisingly strong. Patricia scoffed, thinking the girl was simply bargaining. "Don't be foolish. I am offering you financial freedom for life, your father's life, girl." Michelle grabbed the silk pillow from behind her head and hurled it weakly at Patricia. "I said get out. I will not harm my baby. He is my son's father, and this is his family, whether you like it or not. And if you try to stop me or hurt my father, I will tell the entire city about the day you tried to bribe me to silence the fact that I saved your ungrateful life." It was a desperate bluff, but it struck a nerve. Patricia, momentarily stunned by the girl's defiant resolve, her worst fears realized, could only glare at her with venomous hatred before turning and storming out. The business card for the doctor crumpled in her fist. The war had just gone nuclear. She would find another way to ensure that this child, and its mother, never saw the light of day as a member of the Williams Johnson family. Robert had to be protected from his own foolish affections, and the family name had to be cleansed of this disastrous commonness. The kitchen, once a clandestine haven for their stolen moments and shared dreams, now felt like the eye of a hurricane. Robert, finally informed by Michelle, not about the assassination attempt on their child, but about his mother's increasing, unbearable hostility and the doctor's appointment card she had subsequently found crumpled in the trash, was beside himself. His anger was a seismic event, an intense, destructive force born of love and betrayal. He held Michelle close, trembling with a controlled rage she had never witnessed, his large, powerful frame shaking with emotion. "She sent you to a clinic? She tried to coerce you to hurt our baby, my mother, after you saved her life?" His voice cracked, the raw sound of heartbreak mixing with the thunderous realization of his mother's moral bankruptcy. "I always knew she was cruel, obsessed with status, but this is monstrous, Michelle. This is a level of calculated evil I never thought her capable of." Michelle, pale and exhausted, simply held on to him, needing his strength to anchor her against the storm his mother had unleashed. Robert didn't hesitate. He walked directly into Patricia's private study, where she was enjoying a glass of expensive port, seemingly unconcerned by the moral debris she had left scattered in her wake. "Pack a bag," he commanded, his voice devoid of any warmth, any recognizable filial affection. "You are leaving. Now." Patricia looked up, startled by the sheer coldness of his tone. "Robert, darling, don't be dramatic. I was trying to protect you from a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment. The girl has trapped you, and I was simply implementing a necessary solution for the family's future." Robert stepped forward, resting his scarred hands on the antique desk, leaning close until his face, etched with disappointment and finality, was inches from hers. "You don't understand, do you? You don't see anything beyond your own malignant pride. You didn't just hurt Michelle. You attempted to destroy the one decent, honest, and truly loving thing I have ever had in my life. You had the opportunity to know happiness, to have a grandchild, to reclaim some semblance of humanity, and instead you chose your precious, empty society. You preferred my protracted suffering and loneliness to the prospect of a family with a common name. I'm not a child, Mother. I'm a 35-year-old man who runs into burning buildings to save strangers. I can assure you, I am perfectly capable of deciding whom I love and with whom I start a family." He straightened up, his eyes hard and uncompromising. "You have no right to this house, no right to my life, and no right to our future. The lawyers will contact you. Take what you need and be gone before morning. I want you out of my life, permanently." The sheer conviction in his voice, the terrible finality of his rejection, shattered Patricia's composure. She finally understood that she had lost everything. Not just the battle, but the war, the son, and the only genuine power she ever wielded. That same hour, Robert took Michelle and, in a whirlwind of decisiveness, drove them 300 miles south, far from the suffocating, toxic atmosphere of the Johnson estate. They settled into a modest, sun-drenched apartment near a fire station in a bustling, working-class neighborhood, a place that felt infinitely safer and warmer than the lonely opulence they left behind. Robert immediately began the process of liquidating his trust funds. The money was a source of his mother's control, and he wanted no part of it. He purchased a new, functional truck, enough savings to cover Michelle's nursing school tuition, and enough for her father's long-term care, which they had moved to a superior facility in their new city. For the first few months, life was a continuous struggle to establish a new normal. Robert transferred fire departments, sacrificing some seniority but gaining peace. Michelle enrolled in her prerequisite courses, studying furiously between bouts of morning sickness, and they prepared their small home for the arrival of their son, who they decided to name Anthony, after Robert's grandfather, who had been estranged from Patricia for similar reasons of class prejudice.